Hey friends, did you guys know that I'm working on the combat systems for my 2D horror game? Again? Hope you're all doing well. Today will be a much shorter video covering some of the small improvements that I've made to the code as well as just a general overview of what I have working so far. As I mentioned in my previous devlog, I'm using an event-driven controller approach to manage pretty much everything in my game. This approach has its own pros and cons, which I'll briefly cover in a bit, but first it might help to actually see what I mean because I understand that it's likely not the way most game devs structure their code, at least from what I've seen. The bread and butter of my game's code structure lies in the controllers, which can either be singletons, as is the case for the UI controller, or game objects with multiple instances, like the enemy controller. In either case, the controller essentially acts like an Amazon warehouse and it doesn't actually do much of anything, at least on its own. Instead, it's more like a hub where all of the scripts responsible for performing actions in game send their requests to, or get requests from, other components. For example, the combat script attached to a unit game object like the player or an NPC will make a request for an animation to play. This request gets sent to the controller, the animation component then consumes that request and then plays the animation. The main reason I went with this approach was to centralize the dependency tree. Rather than having a bunch of components dependent on one another, the only thing they really depend on is the controller. If we look at that previous example, if the combat script is missing, then no big deal. The animation script just won't run since no events have been emitted to the controller. And if the animation script is missing, then once again, no issue. The call to request an animation will just get swallowed up in the controller as there isn't a component consuming that request. As you'd expect, this makes debugging my game a waking nightmare from which there is no end. Okay, I'm being dramatic, but when an animation doesn't play, it's kind of hard to tell if there's a bug somewhere in the code, or if I just forgot to make that request, or as I alluded to before, I just forgot to add the animation script to the game object entirely. Essentially, in that warehouse example, when packages aren't shipped, it's not always clear if the warehouse never received the package, or they received it but the shipping label is wrong, or if the workers decided to unionize. It's just not always clear. However, this approach does make adding new scripts much easier. I don't have to pass around a reference to the animation script in order to call it. I can simply add a new script, have it reference the controller, and then just make a generic call to emit that event when the animation is needed. Something else that I've structured my project around is scriptable objects. These were deceptively easy to use at first. However, as I've toyed around with them more and more, their utility has certainly lessened. They essentially act as a model or schema definition for any game object that I plan to instantiate multiple times. This makes the process of creating new weapons, items, enemies, or even levels much easier, as I can pass in a reference to a scriptable object in one of my scripts, and then just use that reference as a base template for creating new entities in my game. As a caveat to this, any changes made to a scriptable object persist whether you're in-game or out, so if I tweak or modify any parameters while playing, once I stop, those parameters are still there. The drawback to this, of course, is that if, let's say, you wanted to track an enemy's health or a weapon's ammo count, when you stop the game, these changes will persist. So the next time you're playtesting, you may have a character spawning with 0 health, even though you initially set it to 5. It's because of this that scriptable objects have been relegated to static parameters that I don't plan on changing while my game is running, such as an item's name or the sound it makes when you pick it up. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.